Today we're going to hear from Senator Lisa Murkowski, Kelly Tshibaka, and Pat Chesbro. Welcome to the Chamber's Forum. Thank you for being here. We have questions that came from the Chamber's Legislative Committee. We also have questions that have come from members on our Chamber website. And then a few have come in the door today. If you have a burning question, go ahead and write it on the card. We're going to get to as many as we can. Tasha, there's folks already. There's lots of good questions. I wish we had more time. So we're going to start with an opening statement, but I also wanted the candidates to see Shayna. Are you the timer? Shayna, raise your hand big and tall. So Shayna's going to give you the we have 15 seconds and stop. Can you show us the signs? And then when you hold them up, if you hold them and make sure that you've made eye contact, yeah. And because each answer is a minute. And if you need to wrap up a thought, please do that. We're not going to jump all over you, but there is a bell that she will ring after a couple extra seconds. So you want to ring the bell? Okay, thank you. That's okay. All right, now we're going to go ahead and start with opening statements. You have 1 minute, and we'll start with Kelly Tshibaka over to my far right.
Well, thank you, Chamber, for hosting this event. My parents were once homeless in Alaska, but my mom got a job at the Slope, and they fought their way into the working class, gave birth to me, and I was the first in our family to pursue a college degree, starting at UAA. I worked for Senator Ted Stevens. He encouraged me to go to law school, and that's where I married my husband, Nikki, the son of an African immigrant. Together, we have 5 amazing children. I've spent my career fighting to make government work for the people. I've served in Inspector General offices, exposing waste, fraud, and abuse, and holding government accountable for many federal agencies, including the FBI, DOD, CIA, Department of Energy, and Coast Guard. I understand how to get the bureaucracy to work for us and not against us. This race is about the future of Alaska. Instead of having a senator who helps Joe Biden by pushing through red flag gun control and radical nominees who've declared war on our energy industry, I'll protect Alaskan jobs and our Second Amendment rights. I'm running because I owe everything to this great state, and I want to fight for the people who fought for me. Thank you.
Senator Murkowski, you want to go next?
Thank you, and thank you to the Anchorage Chamber. This Senate race is really about one thing, and that one thing is about who can deliver for the state of Alaska. Who is best to help deliver on infrastructure, to develop our resources, to keep our taxes low? Who is best to reduce regulatory burdens, to keep our economy growing, to help it be that vibrant economy that helps attract and retain our young entrepreneurs? And it's through my leadership, my seniority in the Senate, my commitment to bipartisanship, that I have been able to deliver in these areas. And I've done it by working in partnership with Alaska's businesses. Many of you are represented in this room. I'm proud to be endorsed by these businesses, whether it's the NFIB, whether it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, whether it's the many Alaska Native corporations that do strong business in this state, or so many business leaders. I'm grateful for their support, and I'm grateful to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. I think the contributions of our Indigenous people, especially in Alaska, are significant and ongoing, and I really appreciate all of the things I have learned throughout my life here. We moved here in 1974 for 1 year. I think that's a common story, but Alaska captured us, and I'm still here, a couple of years later. As a lifelong educator, I am really concerned about the future. And I am running for office because of that future and making sure that our children and our grandchildren have the same rights, have the same opportunities that we had, including, of course, reproductive health care rights. We need to be able to do that. We need to curb gun violence. And we, of course, need to fix our climate thing. And I think we can do that together. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say the Chamber is all about just hearing the candidates on issues, so I'm not going to read super partisan, attacky type questions, not here today. So just putting that out there. Thank you. There's so many issues to talk about, but we're going to start today with the war in Ukraine, because again, there was attacks on civilian neighborhoods today, well far from the fighting lines. The U.S. has spent approximately $15 billion on this effort, and it doesn't seem to have an end. So we'd like your thoughts on what is the end game here and what is the appropriate role for the U.S.? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Senator Murkowski.
The end game is we need to be there for Ukraine, with Ukraine. What Putin has perpetrated with the violence and truly, I believe that they are war crimes that we are seeing take place in Ukraine right now. I think when Putin first invaded, there was some discussion that it was going to go relatively quickly because Ukraine, it was a mismatch. And I think the Ukrainian people and their perseverance and their focus has been extraordinary and a lesson to all of us. We need to be there to help the Ukrainian people. And we have done so in a way that I think is making the difference. I think we're seeing that on the ground as they are prevailing against all odds. It has taken resources. It has taken sacrifices from the United States and from other countries. But think about the sacrifices that the people in Ukraine are making in the defense of freedom.
Thank you. Pat Chesbro?
Of course we should be in Ukraine. Of course we should be defending democracy around this world. I agree that the people of Ukraine are formidable and inventive and all of those kinds of things, and they could not be in the position that they are in right now without our help and without the help of the world. I appreciate that our government has come together to encourage the world to help the Ukrainian people to defend their land, their people. It's horrific. I wish I could say I think it's going to be over tomorrow, but I think Putin is learning a lesson from his own people at this point in time, where people are fleeing his country instead of being conscripted into the army that they know that they might die. So I appreciate what we're doing. We are doing the right thing, and I appreciate that we didn't send troops there, frankly.
Thank you. Kelly Tshibaka.
I believe the best way forward for us is to use strong diplomatic reasoning to exercise force on Putin to stop his energy dominance. We are the people who put him in this place when Biden greenlit Nord Stream 2. And if we were to become energy independent and energy dominant again, I think that the global game would change. Biden has a large role that he could play here by stopping Putin's role on the global stage, helping Ukraine with its energy solution, and making NATO come to the table and be NATO, for example, having Germany not be supplicants to Russia for its energy, and us also not going around and being supplicants to Russia for its energy as we have this past year, and instead getting Alaskan energy back up and running again and Alaskan workers back up and running again. I think that would be a really good first step to stopping this problem with Ukraine.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Pat Chesbro, on the next one. In August, the Biden administration announced a program to forgive up to $20,000 in student loan debt for federal borrowers. It's been pretty controversial. Do you support this, and why or why not?
I do support it at this point in time. I do think there might be more done, however, and I've often thought that those people that we hear of that have been paying on student debt for a number of years and now owe more than they borrowed, we need to figure this out a little bit. Of course, they've been paying kind of a high interest rate to the for their federal loans, like 5% or more, and so $10,000 may not be even one semester's worth of reprieve, but I would like to see us look at what they initially borrowed, deduct every penny that they've paid, and then refinance those loans at a lower interest rate and let them pay off the rest in a reasonable way. I think that would be fair. I worry about giving anyone too much money, and then there's a lot of people that aren't going to benefit from that, but I don't think $10,000 is the end of the world, and I think we should do it.
Okay. Kelly Tshibaka, we'll go to you.
I believe that this was yet another unconstitutional act by Joe Biden. I think that Congress holds the power of the purse, not Joe Biden, to unilaterally forgive loans. I also think that this is fundamentally unfair for all of those students and families who took out loans and paid them back. When you take out a loan, it's a contract you have and a debt obligation you have. So I don't see $10,000 checks arriving for all of those families who already paid back their obligation. If this is a discussion that I think needed to happen with Congress and the president before we took on even more in our national debt, which I think now is becoming a national security issue facing America. Our children, grandchildren, now great-grandchildren tomorrow are going to be paying for the tens of trillions of dollars that we are now incurring in debt. What are we up to? About $5 trillion just under the Biden administration. And these are very serious discussions that need to be happening with Congress, not just at Joe Biden's desk.
Okay, Senator Murkowski.
I think we're all empathetic to the heavy debt burden that students are leaving schools with. We recognize that. But this is not helping the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is how much higher education is and the burden that imposes on everyone. I agree with Kelly on this one, that this is an exercise of authority by President Biden that I think is beyond his scope to allow. And I think you're going to see that challenged through the courts here. This is somewhere between $300 and $400 billion that is going to be the burden, essentially, to all of us. That is going to be added to our debt at a time of high inflation, at a time when we are all looking to address these issues that are in front of us. My solution would have been to kind of follows on what Pat was saying here. Let's look at the interest rates that are being charged to all students who take out student loan debt. Let's make it more equitable. But what has been proposed and what's going forward right now is not.
Thank you. This next question is a state question, but the Chamber finds it interesting, and we'd like to know what you all think as Alaskans. Senator Murkowski, we're going to start with you. The Constitutional Convention, how you're planning to vote on it and why?
I will be voting against moving forward with a constitutional convention. I believe pretty strongly that we have a process in place through our legislature to address those changes that we would like to see made. And that is working through a constitutional amendment. Yes, it's a little bit heavier lift in terms of the 2/3 requirement to move it through the legislature. But we've got a process in place to do that. Every decade, when Alaskans have had an opportunity to weigh in on whether we should have a constitutional convention, I think we have wisely taken the approach of saying no. And I think that's what we should do in 2022.
Okay. Pat Chesbro?
I, too, will vote no on the Constitutional Convention. I believe that we have a strong Constitution, and we have a way to amend it if we like. I remember reading about the beginning of that Constitution. They looked at constitutions around the country, and they looked to see what ones worked, what didn't work. They talked to people, and we had the opportunity this one time, at least, to be the 48th state and not or 49th state. We were allowed to look to see what worked for other people before we made up our minds. I think we have a good Constitution. I think we can amend it. I will vote no.
All right. Kelly?
We believe government's of the people, by the people, for the people. And we have a provision that allows us, the people, to examine the Constitution and decide if there's any changes that need to be made. I'm not at all afraid of Alaskans taking the opportunity to examine the Constitution and then put proposals before the people for us to vote it up or down and say we do or don't want those changes. I am very afraid of the legislature at the federal or the local level just unilaterally amending the Constitution through legislative action, like what just happened with Biden's red flag law, which the incumbent voted for. It says a Second Amendment shall not be infringed, but I sure see a lot of infringing happening. A Constitution either is or isn't a Constitution. If you want to amend it, then amend it. But we need to use the processes we have in place, either technical amendments in the legislature or the people amending it through a constitutional convention. But I am not okay by amending it through statute from congressmen and senators who decide things need to change when the people aren't the ones deciding it. Of the people, by the people, for the people, I'm a yes vote on the constitutional convention.
Okay, we're going to take a little minute here to do some fun lightning round questions. You have green and pink. Apparently, we ran out of red paper at the chamber today, so I think that was kind of funny. It's like a gender reveal. But so I'm going to ask a question and then just hold up which side is apropos for
And
you.
which is which?
Green is yes, and pink is no. Sorry, that's a little vague. Pink being in the red family. So green is yes, pink is no. All right. Have you ever considered switching political parties?
No.
Do you think democracy is the final and best form of government?
Yes.
I can't see. Okay. Guess it doesn't really matter if I can see. Have you ever attended a protest march or a rally?
A protest rally or a regular
A
rally?
protest or a rally or any kind of march for a political cause? Okay. Would you stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning to watch live election results?
Junkie.
Don't we all? Isn't that what we all do?
East Coast time?
And the final one, do you support the U.S. investing the time and money to return to the moon? All right. That's our lightning round questions. On to the more serious stuff. Let's see, whose turn is it to go first? Is it yours, Pat Chesbro? Maybe we'll start with you.
I'd be glad to.
Okay. This one came from the audience, and I'm going to ask it. It was directed to you, Senator Murkowski, but I'm going to ask it in a general phase because I do want to get in some of the audience questions. What is your support or not of the Jones Act? This particular person thinks that it's costing thousands of dollars for families every year and millions of dollars for the state of Alaska. So Jones Act and whether you support it. Pat.
I'm not understanding, I guess.
Do you support the Jones Act?
The Jones Act,
Sorry.
yes. I support the Jones Act.
Because?
Because I think that it's a fair thing. I think we're part of a country, and I believe that the Jones Act is, I think we're part of a nation, and we go along with what other people need to do.
Senator Murkowski?
So I am a Jones Act supporter, have long been, because I believe that it's important that we provide for those jobs for Americans, whether it is within the shipbuilding trades or in the maritime trades. Jones Act has been around for a long time. It's been over 100 years, and there's a lot of discussion about whether or not the Jones Act time has come and gone. I think we see requests for Jones Act waivers in specific instances. We saw it not too long ago with regards to Puerto Rico and trying to get energy resources to Puerto Rico, and there is authority to move around a Jones Act waiver. We kind of did it in a little way, a mini way, with the PVSA, the Passenger Vessel Services Act, which is kind of a subset, if you will, of Jones Act, but we were able to effectively allow for a reopening of the tourist business during the pandemic in 2021. And so I support the Jones Act. I recognize that there are issues that come up on an occasional basis that we've got to deal with Jones Act.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, you have the final word on this question.
I would support amendments to the Jones Act. We need to make some changes. It's really hurting us Alaskans. There was a study done in the late 80s that showed the Jones Act provisions were costing us over $100 million extra because of the freight transportation costs for Alaskans. Imagine how much that's costing us now. And just last year, early this year, one of our fishing companies got hit with tens of millions of dollars in extra charges because of Jones Act violations. This is hitting our commercial industry in a really bad way, and it will be disproportionately affected because of our position with respect to the lower 48. We need to really seriously examine the cost benefit of the Jones Act compared to the intent and purpose for which it was written a century ago, and the protection for us from a national security perspective. I'm in the position that right now the cost to Alaskans when we are going to work to pay for gas to go to work, we really need to examine the inflation aspect that's being put on us by the cost of the Jones Act, and I would support amending it.
Thank you. And I apologize for the poor way I asked the questions, but I think we got the answer. Next question came from our chamber website, so I'll call it an audience question. Federal environmental permitting and related litigation has posed a challenge to resource development projects in Alaska. What can you do to promote socially and environmentally responsible resource development in our state? And Kelly, we'll start with you.
On this environmental permitting thing, this is one of my top priorities. We have got the federal government inserting risk into our business process. There's a law that says they've got to have their permits done in 2 years. We're hovering around 4.5 to 5 years as the average, and then you've got to go through the process multiple times. We have a senior position on appropriations in the Energy Committee. These agencies have not had their budgets cut. They've not had a series of hearings before the Energy Committee. We've got to hold them accountable. I came from the watchdog offices, the inspector general offices. I would start investigations and audits using these agencies, internal mechanisms. I would want to budget cut them. I would want to have these hearings held. We've got to get them accountable to their own permitting guidelines. We need to have litigation reform so that we don't have our companies going through double jeopardy. You get a final record of decision, it should be final. And if there's going to be litigation, then the federal government needs to be a party to it on our side. They issued a final record of decision, we should be able to count on it. These are some basic things that need to be done, and the federal government needs to help us.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski?
We absolutely need permitting reform. We've got an incredible opportunity before us with this infrastructure bill that I helped negotiate and navigate, and we're now in that implementation stage. And I think there's a recognition that making sure that a permitting process is fair, is workable, has long been a priority. We're in the process now of working through yet another permitting reform measure. My hope is that it's actually going to be bipartisan, because if it's not going to go anywhere. We saw that happen just about a month ago. We've done permitting reform through the American Mineral Security Act, which was my bill, through the Energy Act, as well as some subsets within the infrastructure bill. But we've got to be doing more, and we recognize that. I do think, though, that when you suggest that somehow or the other the answer is to cut the budgets, whether it's the Army Corps or the EPA or those who are doing the regulating, that doesn't help with getting a more expedited process.
Thank you. Pat Chesbro.
And I would say thank you to Senator Murkowski for all she's doing, because I think it's really important that permitting be effective and efficient. We need to be watching out for our environment, and that's what permitting is supposed to do. If it needs to be funded accurately, we need to have the people who are expert at doing the permitting out there, and we need to move forward and fix the problem and don't get rid of the permitting.
Okay. We have time for one more question and then your closing statements. The question, all the pundits are saying one of the issues that's going to turn the midterms one way or the other is choice. Roe v. Wade was overturned by the United States Supreme Court and said it's up to the states. Senator Lindsey Graham then introduced a national abortion ban after 15 weeks. There's also talk of codifying abortion into federal law. So which is it? Pat, we'll start with you.
Needs to be codified into federal law. A person's reproductive choices belong to that person. They don't belong to someone sitting somewhere else deciding for them. Since the Roe v. Wade decision, I've spoken to 5 people who have been directly affected by abortion access. One of them actually was a person who is in his 60s now. His mother found out she had cancer when she was pregnant with him. Her doctors in a Catholic hospital, by the way, suggested and told her she should have an abortion because she could not have she could not have the kind of treatment that they would offer her to help her get over her cancer. She chose to have a child. Choice is two ways. It's not just abortion for abortion's sake. It's choosing what is best for you and what is best for your family. And I think it needs to be in law to allow people to make those decisions.
Kelly Tshibaka?
Well, I'm pro-life. The incumbents voted multiple times to allow for abortions for even when the baby's coming out the birth canal. I would absolutely sign Lindsey Graham's bill for a limit nationwide somewhere in the second trimester. That still allows for a choice for someone to decide for before that. I'd also support women's access to birth control, for women to have birth control without a prescription and without a doctor getting involved. An independent fact-check reviewer fact-checked all those smear ads about me and said that those were all a lie, if anybody had heard all of those. And so my position on birth control is that we should have more access. A final difference between me and the incumbent, I wouldn't vote for taxpayer-funded abortions. I'd advocate for funding to come back here to Alaska to support all of our women's healthcare clinics that are providing women's healthcare services. We need more of that, especially in the rural communities I visited.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski.
So I not only support codifying Roe versus Wade into law, but I have introduced bipartisan legislation to do just that. Not only codifying Roe, but recognizing that we can't take women's rights, whether it is as it relates to abortion or reproductive health care more largely, we can't take them back 50 years. We cannot threaten a woman with the prospect that contraception, something that we believe was resolved decades and decades ago, is now on the table, as Kelly has indicated in her own words in video that's on the website out there, that she would support doing.
Your fact check is wrong.
I support a woman's right to choose, but I recognize that it is not without limitation. I have voted against partial birth abortion. I have voted against federal funding. I recognize the limitations, and that's why I think we need to codify Roe versus Wade, and we need to protect women's reproductive health care.
Thank you. So now we have time for 30-second closings, and then audience, we're going to switch candidates and go to the next phase. So don't get all the Twitter during the switch, because I'll have to bring you all back. So go ahead. Senator Murkowski, would you start with your 30-second closing?
I want to thank you. I want to thank the chamber. You know, I think it is really easy to be critical of the work of someone else, but it's another thing to actually do the work. And for years, that's what I've been doing. I've been delivering results for Alaska. I've been helping to support our businesses and our economies. I'm proud of what we've done with the infrastructure law. I'm proud of what we did to help businesses get through the pandemic, whether it's from healthcare to military construction to resource development. I don't just talk, I deliver for Alaska, and I'd be proud to earn your vote. Thank you so much.
Kelly Tshibaka?
So Senator Sullivan recently said, who do you stand with? Do you stand with the American people, the families that are being crushed, and the workers that are suffering? Or do you stand with Joe Biden, the radical environmentalists, and the special interests that have ties to this White House? That's the decision that's before Alaska. Do we want a senator who's going to stand with Alaska, or do we want the senator who's been standing with Joe Biden, the radical environmentalists, and all the dark money that's being funded into her campaign? Our senator needs to be willing to take some heat in D.C. to do what's right for Alaska. It is not bipartisan to do everything Joe Biden wants you to do, but then obstruct the administration before this and all the nominees that administration put forward. I think we can power America with our energy and build America with our lumber and create it with our minerals, but we have to have a leader who won't be bullied and bought by D.C.
Thank you. Pat Chesbro, closing statement.
And I am still future-oriented, and I think we can all work together to solve the complex problems we've discussed today, the other complex problems that are out there. And I'm a person who works with others to do that. I don't think a single person has the right idea or the wrong idea. I think we need to work together to make sure that our children and our grandchildren can thrive in our world and have a good future. So thank you for inviting me today, and have a good day.
Can we give them a round of applause, please?